Welcome back to a casual review, a show in which we review a book. Today it's going to be The Schizoid Phenomena, Object Relations, and the Self by Harry Guntrip. It was a very interesting read, I felt. However, I have to stretch this before we review it. It uses a whole range of concepts, most notably the concept of schizoid, which is a bit more encompassing than what we have in the DSM, meaning that it's not a one-to-one replica of the schizoid personality disorder, but it's relatively close. The idea of gut trip is that there are some people that defy classic psychoanalysis. By classic, Harry Guntrip talks about Freud and the ideas of Freud. That some people are not into the basic fantasy of the Oedipal complex, but that on a much deeper level are affected. Those people are what he calls schizoid, meaning that they have basically forfeited relationships, that they're not really in contact, nor with others, nor with themselves. That non contact is something that they are very deep entrenched to, meaning that they don't necessarily trust, not in a paranoid sense, but just in the deeper sense of they would not trust others to take care of them. They don't want to trust others with their feelings. They want to seclude themselves from society, often with fantasies of being autonomous, independent, not relying on anyone. And Harry Guntrip explains that this is basically a protection because growing up, they were not able to rely on their parents nor on their immediate environment to treat them with decency and respect, that they were, I can say, cut off from it, being integrated into the whole of humanity, being considered a person per se. And that form of neglect has deeply affected them, meaning that they're not able to connect, or they're not, in some cases, even willing to connect because they feel that the others could only bring hurt and misery to them. So it's a very important point that he stretches that a relationship needs to be created, a deep and trusting relationship. And of course, what better than therapy? And that's the big point of Harry Guntrip, is that those people can heal from their trauma, can start to love, to be with others, to trust them through the therapeutic relationship, through discovering that they have been split inside, split in between a part of them that doesn't want to trust others, that wants to become autonomous, and an even deeper part that wishes always and consistently and and is the deepest desire to connect it to someone, to be with someone in the most profound sense of the way. And Harry Guntrip, I always have to say Guntrip afterwards, but my first reflex is to sing Harry. I did not know Harry Guntrip, obviously, but anyway, find it funny to mention it. Harry Guntrip does point out that basically those people have to regress through the relationship. It's through the therapy that since start to develop. They regress and then they move forward with their lives. They can trust and love again. That's great and that's wonderful. And they can go further than they've ever been before into their trust and into their relationships. And that's something that's great. I mean, it's really wonderful to see that how he does it, how he mentions it. And there's also another aspect to this book, which is a hard, even dry theoretical language. Because what you have to remember is Guntrip is also a theoretician, meaning he's going to go into concepts, he's going to think about things, and he's going to develop on what is pre existing. He does talk a lot about Freud and later in the book, much later, Melanie Klein, and how those are very important moments. And if you know anything about Melanie Klein, you know that it's abstract, it's not necessarily applicable per se in the therapy, and it gives a whole framework uh, of connections, projections, etc., etc. And he goes into this in the most subtle and exhaustive way. However, that's the whole point. Because he's so thorough with it, it's not a good read for a layman, meaning if you know nothing in psychoanalysis, in object relations, you're going to be a bit at a loss because he does imply in his writing that when he talks about Freud, the Oedipus complex, he kind of doesn't go through with it, and so you kind of are expected to know what it is. But that's what's interesting also about the book is that it is really for the professional. As a professional, I felt that I gained a lot of knowledge through it, that I was able to understand a lot of it. But I think if you're on the other side of the spectrum, meaning if you know nothing about it, it's not going to be an easy read. And I really want to stretch this that if you're going to read this, you're going to have to be prepared as a, how can I say, as an academic bit of knowledge and an essay, but not being like, for example, on the other side of the spectrum, Merlot May, which is easier to understand as a layman. Here, it's not quite the case. And there's also some very interesting ideas that Harry Guntrip does put forward, like the in and out relationship, which I found is one of the most interesting, how can I say, concepts that I've come across in quite a while. That some people, because they've been so hurt, need to master the relationship, need to, how can I say, set the pace, that they're not into this relationship as equals, that they have to, how can I say, somehow choose what is going to happen. Meaning that if it becomes too much, they can just quit, and then when they feel better, come back. And that's what he calls in and out. And I found that that was very, very interesting. And it's very clinically true that some people just need to be able to set the rules for themselves. And he says that it is important to let them do so, to let them become a bit of the masters of the relationship. Of course, it always has to be questioned and it always has to be taken into account when analyzing the phenomena, but it's important and it's to be respected because that's the only way that they can develop trust is through the idea of mastering the relationship. And after that, after the mastery, they can regress and they can start trusting and loving again. But it takes time and it takes a lot of dedication both from the therapist and from the patient, that it's doable. And that I think is the best thing ever, is that basically Harry Guntrip shows that takes work, takes dedication, but even those that we classically believe to be beyond our scope are not. And that given the time, given the emotions, and given the therapeutic relationship, that they could grow and they could come forward as full individuals. And that's another point that talks about is that they're also, how can I say, in discovery of their selves because they had to put forward a false self, to use Winnicott's wording, to survive with the world. A false sense of who they are in the form of mask, which is close also to Jung's persona, that they had to basically put forward to survive. And with time, they can change that false sense of self into a true one, into a meaningful one. And that's also the goal of the therapy, to discover the true self and to let it thrive. And that is great. That's wonderful. Anyway, I hope this has interested you. Um, and I hope that if ever you want to ask a question or say something, please feel free to do so in the commentaries. So I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.